so much. It really is an honor to be with so many committed, engaged, idealistic people united by a commitment to women and children. CARE is a unique and effective organization. I've seen the compassionate work that it supports on the ground. I've done CARE trips. And I've seen the passionate advocacy it does here in Washington. And that combination is really powerful. It gives you a standing to make a difference in D.C. And it's making a large impact for the world's most vulnerable people. Let me start by telling you just a little bit about myself. Speechwriters are supposed to be anonymous, and at this task I've succeeded beyond my wildest dreams. I didn't really come from a global development background. I was a theology major at Wheaton College in Illinois. Some of you may know it. As you probably know, it's a pretty religiously conservative place. When I went there, the joke on campus was that the administration had banned premarital sex because it might lead to dancing. I did domestic policy issues on Capitol Hill for many years, for about a decade. I spent some time in the media, where I was a senior editor at U.S. News and World Report. And then in 1999, I got a call from then Governor George W. Bush of Texas, who wanted to meet me right down the road at the JW Marriott Hotel. And the first thing he said to me was, this isn't an interview. I've read your stuff. I want you to write my announcement speech, my convention speech, and my inaugural address. And I want you to move to Austin immediately. At this point, he was not even a declared candidate. But it was, he's a persuasive guy, and I picked up my family and moved to Austin. It began a serious and interesting journey for me, eventually as head of speechwriting at the White House, as a policy advisor to the president. I really gained tremendous respect for anyone of either party who serves in those kind of roles. The pace of those years, which included 9/11 and war and peace and natural disaster, was at times exhausting. It has a cost to your health. In December of 2004, while I was working on President Bush's second inaugural address, I had a heart attack. The president's doctor had me checked into the hospital under an assumed name to avoid all the press calls. And adding insult to incapacity, there wasn't a single call. But it also has a cost to your family. During the heat of the presidential election of 2004, my little boy Nicholas, who was then 6 years old, informed me in the car that he wanted John Kerry for president. And when I asked him why, he said, "So you can be home on weekends." My 9-year-old, who was a little more practical, then said, "But how would we eat?" I told him I think I could get a job, I might go to a think tank, and he said, of course, "What's a think tank?" And so I told him, well, it's people who read and speak and have meetings and things. And Bucky, and this is true, said, "You mean they don't do anything?" After the 2004 election, my job at the White House changed. I became a policy advisor to the president focused on global health and development and genocide, areas where my interests had been leading me for many years. And I saw something very hopeful. In one of the bitterest times of partisanship in modern history, I found a number of issues where members of both parties and people of every ideology have come together. Part of my job at the White House was to work with conservative and liberal groups on the fight against global AIDS and to confront malaria and to oppose global sex trafficking and to confront the crisis in Darfur. And I've seen some odd alliances grow over the years. I've gotten to know Bono of the rock band U2 a bit. Several years ago, he invited me to the first rock concert I had ever attended, and it was loud. Soon afterwards, I remember my wife and I had dinner with Bono, who is a very idealistic and principled man. And after the dinner, my wife told me, "You may be idealistic and principled, but it would also be nice if you were rich and cool." Now I'm a columnist for the Washington Post, living under the tyranny of 2 deadlines a week. I often fill in for my friend David Brooks on the PBS NewsHour when he's out of town. If David is off, there is actually a PBS union rule that requires the presence of a nerdy moderate on the program. I'm a fellow at ONE, a bipartisan group dedicated to the fight against extreme poverty and preventable disease. A lot of groups in Washington say they're bipartisan. ONE demonstrates it by including a range from Mike Huckabee to John Podesta. These issues are truly an exception, a safe haven from the polarization and bitterness of American politics. My first major exposure to the issues central to care came in the context of the global AIDS crisis. I saw how community health workers, most of them women, many of them HIV positive themselves, became irreplaceable leaders in the AIDS response. I also saw how all our prevention efforts depended on the rights of women. No element of prevention, abstinence, faithfulness, or condom use is effective when women have no power in a relationship. There's an essential connection between the spread of disease and discrimination and violence against women. And there is an essential connection between health and human rights. Second conviction came in part out of a care trip that I joined to the Congo, to Eastern Congo. We visited a village on the shores of Lake Kivu. You noticed on that trip a lot of young children, but not many middle-aged women. And when you talked to the women, it was quickly evident why. In that part of Eastern Congo, complications from childbirth are as dangerous as militia in the countryside. Some of the women I talked to had 13 children. Each birth raises the risk of hemorrhage and infection, and those odds increase when births come early in life, late in life, and in rapid succession. The women of the village, with help from CARE, pay a little each week into a common fund. When the time comes to give birth, that becomes a loan for transportation and hospital fees, and the group encourages family planning. This is often a controversial topic here in DC, but it shouldn't be. When births are spaced more than 24 months apart, both mothers and children are dramatically more likely to survive. In cases like this, family planning is a pro-life cause, and everyone should support it. And over the years, I've also seen the terrible carnage of gender-based violence. I remember meeting a young woman in Eastern Congo named Luciane. She had been captured by rebels, forced into sexual slavery, regularly abused, punished by being kept in a hole in the ground. When she finally escaped, she had a sexually transmitted disease and was pregnant. Her husband abandoned her. Her family farm had been taken over by others. When I met her, she was sleeping at night in a cassava field because the rebels had vowed to take back her baby, what they called their baby. You could hear similar stories of many women in any of the long lines at the Panzi Hospital. Rape in Congo is used as a form of intimidation, humiliation, and eradication of other groups. It is a different kind of genocide designed to destroy women and communities. Women like this need some kind of voice, and I thank all of you for providing it. For me, all of this adds up to one big lesson. Defending the rights of women, investing in their skills and future is the most strategic development intervention. When women earn, they feed their children and provide school fees. When women learn, they lift up whole communities. When women are treated with respect, health and peace advance. Members of Congress need to hear this. Even in a time of austerity, investments in health and the future of women are essential. These investments express American values, a belief in human dignity that should unite us as a people. But these investments also serve American interests. By encouraging hope, progress, health, and good government, we also encourage long-term stability and peace. The advance of hope in the world is good for America. And I hope you bring one more message to the Hill in a time of sequestration. Politicians employ across-the-board cuts because they don't want to make difficult choices. But cuts that are evenly applied are not evenly felt. There's a difference between cutting a highway program and cutting a malaria program or an infant maternal health program, a measurable difference in lost lives. The sequester is an abdication of governing, and somehow Washington needs to get back its moral compass. Let me close with one more story from my time in government. I'm sure many of you have had the experience of trying to help someone and finding they have more to offer you than you can possibly give. Several years ago, I was in Kampala, Uganda, in a refugee community on the side of a steep hill. 90% of the residents were women or children. Refugees from up north, where a brutish cultish rebel group called the Lord's Resistance Army had killed large numbers of the men. Many of the women were HIV positive and had terrible stories of suffering. Some of the boys had been kidnapped by the LRA and trained as soldiers, forced, I was told, to do terrible things, such as murdering family members and neighbors in their home villages so they could never return. One of the former child soldiers I met was maybe 16 or 17 years old. When the leader of the LRA, Joseph Kony, visited his prisoners, all were forced to prostrate themselves. But this young man looked up in curiosity, and they took out one of his eyes in punishment. The center of the settlement is a steep-walled, open-pit mine. Brush was pushed up against the walls and set on fire to remove water from the rock and cause it to crumble, leaving a permanent haze in the air. The women of the village support themselves by getting rocks out of the pit and breaking them into gravel with small metal hammers. Each has her own pile that she adds to for several hours a day. After Hurricane Katrina on America's Gulf Coast, these women, many of them HIV positive, somehow collected a few $100s and sent it to the American embassy to help with relief efforts. When I went to thank them on behalf of our government, I have never seen a group of people more proud of themselves. I was told by one woman, "We are the donors now." The generosity of the poor turns out to be more impressive than anything we give them. We should be honored to take their side and humble enough to learn from them. Thank you very much.